Somewhere in your kitchen, there is a little bottle of vanilla, and it is probably the most boring thing in the cupboard. Vanilla is the word we use for plain, for basic, for the flavor you pick when you cannot think of anything interesting. Here is the truth that word hides. Real vanilla is the second most expensive spice on the planet, beaten only by saffron. By weight, it has at times been worth more than silver. And the entire reason you can afford even a drop of it comes down to a secret that a 12-year-old enslaved boy figured out in a single morning. A trick so clever that the greatest botanists in Europe had failed to crack it for 300 years. Nearly every vanilla pod on Earth today is still made using his method, by hand, one flower at a time. By the end of this, that boring little bottle is going to look like a miracle. Start with what vanilla actually is, because it is stranger than most people realize. Vanilla is the seed pod of an orchid. Orchids are the great show-offs of the flower world, prized for their blooms. And out of the tens of thousands of orchid species, vanilla is essentially the only one we grow for something to eat. The plant is a climbing vine native to the tropical forests of Mexico, and its story with humans begins long before Europe ever tasted it. The Totonac people of the Mexican coast were the first to cultivate it, weaving it into their culture and their trade. When the Aztecs came to dominate the region, they took vanilla as tribute and did something inspired with it. They ground it into their sacred drink of bitter cacao, the ancestor of chocolate. Vanilla and chocolate, together from the very beginning. Then the Spanish arrived. When the conquistador Hernán Cortés reached the Aztec court in the 16th century, he encountered that dark, spiced drink, and he carried both cacao and vanilla back across the ocean to Europe. And Europe fell in love. Vanilla's warm, deep, floral perfume was like nothing on the continent, and demand exploded. The wealthy wanted it in their chocolate, their desserts, their perfumes. There was just one enormous problem, and it would haunt European growers for 3 centuries. They could get the plant, they could grow the plant, but they could not get it to make a single pod. This is the puzzle at the heart of the whole story. European botanists managed to bring living vanilla vines back from the Americas and coax them to grow beautifully in their heated greenhouses. The vines climbed, they thrived, they even flowered, throwing out pale, elegant blossoms. And then the flowers would wilt, drop off, and leave nothing behind. No pod, no spice. Year after year, in the finest hothouses of France and England, healthy vanilla plants produced absolutely nothing you could sell. The plant seemed to be taunting them. It would do everything except the one thing that mattered. The answer was hidden inside the flower, and it is a beautiful piece of natural engineering. A vanilla blossom contains both the male part, which makes pollen, and the female part, which needs to receive it. But between them sits a small flap of tissue called the rostellum, a natural barrier that stops the flower from simply pollinating itself. Something has to physically lift that flap and move the pollen across. In the forests of Mexico, that something was a specific kind of small bee, evolved alongside the plant, that knew exactly how to do it. And that bee lived only in Mexico. Take the vine to a greenhouse in Paris or a plantation on a distant island, and you have a flower with no partner, a lock with no key. The plant that could grow anywhere warm could only ever bear fruit in one small corner of the world. Which is why, for 300 years, real vanilla stayed rare, precious, and almost impossibly expensive. The breakthrough did not come from a laboratory or a famous scientist. It came from a small volcanic island in the Indian Ocean called Réunion, and from a boy who owned nothing, not even himself. His name was Edmond, and he was born into slavery around 1829. As a child, he was taken in by a plantation owner named Bellier Beaumont, who noticed the boy had an extraordinary gift with plants. Bellier Beaumont taught him about the flowers and the fruit trees of the estate, and among them was a vanilla vine, one of those frustrating imports that grew well and fruited never. On that whole island, as in all of Europe, vanilla was a plant that flowered and gave nothing back. Then, one morning in 1841, Edmond showed his master something impossible. He led him to the vanilla vine, and on it was a small, ripening green pod. A real one. Bellier Beaumont could hardly believe it. He asked the boy how it had happened, and Edmond simply showed him. He took another of the flowers, and with a thin sliver of wood, a splinter, he gently lifted the little flap of the rostellum out of the way, and with a press of his thumb, he pushed the pollen onto the waiting female part. The whole motion took a couple of seconds. He had done by hand, deliberately, what the Mexican bee did by instinct. A 12-year-old, with a splinter and his thumb, had solved the exact problem that had defeated the trained botanists of 2 continents for 300 years. And it was not a fluke. The method was fast, reliable, and could be taught to anyone in minutes. Word spread across Réunion, and the island's growers began pollinating their vanilla by hand, flower by flower, and suddenly the crop that had produced nothing began producing pods by the thousands. Réunion became, for a time, the largest supplier of vanilla in the world. The French carried the boy's technique to their colony of Madagascar, and there it found its perfect home. To this day, Madagascar grows around 80% of the world's vanilla, and every single pod of it traces back to the method a child invented on an island in 1841. That method is also the reason vanilla is still so staggeringly expensive, because it never got any easier. There is no machine for this. Almost all the world's vanilla is still pollinated exactly the way Edmond did it, by human hands, one flower at a time. And the plant makes it brutal. Each vanilla flower opens for roughly a single day. If it is not pollinated that morning, the chance is gone for the whole year. So across the vanilla farms of Madagascar, workers move down the rows every single day of the flowering season, checking each vine and hand-pollinating each open bloom with a splinter and a thumb, in that same 2-second motion, before the flower closes forever. Then the pods take months to mature and months more to cure. A spice that must be fertilized by hand, 1 flower per day, is a spice that will always cost a fortune. When people wonder why real vanilla is worth more than silver, this is the answer. It is the most labor-intensive crop in the world, kept alive by a technique with no shortcut. As for the boy who unlocked it all, his story ends the way too many of these stories do. When slavery was abolished on Réunion in 1848, Edmond was freed, and he took the surname Albius after the white vanilla flower. But others tried to steal his credit. A rival gardener claimed he had discovered the technique first, and though Edmond's old master defended him fiercely in writing, the boy who had handed the world one of its most valuable flavors received almost nothing for it. Edmond Albius died in poverty in 1880, and yet his fingerprints are on every genuine vanilla pod that has been grown in the last 180 years, in Madagascar, in Réunion, everywhere but Mexico. So the next time someone dismisses something as just vanilla, you can tell them the truth. Vanilla is the taste of a rare orchid, a Mexican bee, and a 12-year-old enslaved boy, who, with a splinter and his thumb, solved a mystery that had beaten the world for 3 centuries. Every food has an origin story. This is Foodling.